cracker of a day, huh?
It is a cracker of a day. It is a gorgeous day here in Chattanooga on January 27th, 2022. Welcome aboard, everybody.
Hello, mates.
Hello, mates. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 551.
Okay.
Didn't even need to look today. I was set in stone. I was confident. I was going with my gut. It is a beautiful, an absolutely stunning day here in Chattanooga. We're getting nothing but crisp, cool, getting nothing but sunshine for the next 4 or 5 days as we get ramped up for another run camp next week. For those of you tuning in, well, listen, before we even get to
before we even go there,
Mike and I want to update you guys on our Wordle Score.
Okay.
Whatever that is. You see, that's all I see on like Facebook now. Whenever I peek in, is like people posting their Wordle score, like 227 out of 7. If you want to impress me,
enlighten me on that.
I have no idea.
Sure.
I have no idea. I file it away under reasons I shouldn't go back on Facebook to check out people's Wordle score. Like, if you want to show me what you do in Tetris, then give me a buzz.
Is it a game
Call
or
me.
something?
I have no idea what it is.
If this is what I... Go ahead.
This is what I think it is. I'm not trying to send you on a rabbit hole. I'm just trying to have some little fun and jest with our listeners. Speaking of listeners, it's your first time tuning in. Welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. So we know your time is valuable. So thank you for giving us your time today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, run specific podcasts. We do race recaps. We'll do race previews, which I can't wait to start doing again. Here come into February, March. We'll be doing those again. Also, we'll oftentimes go into our Facebook group, which is you can search Crushing Iron Group if you want to be part of that conversation. Answer one simple question. We'll let you right in. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through. Where we also dive into what our athletes are going through. We work with a wide range of athletes, from beginner level athletes who have never raced in their life to elite level amateurs. We work with athletes locally, and then 95% of our roster is out of state, and the other 20% are even out of the country. So work with a very wide range of not just athletes, but people, which is I think one of our favorite things to do is work with just different personalities, different age ranges, male, female, experienced, not experienced, driven, to be ultimately the most successful they can be in triathlon. And you got others that are just trying to, be healthy and happy and just do something that's consistent, provide structure, and then everyone in between. So we'll use kind of the feedback we have with them and text, email, and sometimes phone calls and training peaks to drive the topic of the day. But that's it. We have no agenda besides to keep you happy and healthy, which is hopefully... It's becoming a popular theme. It's the happy and healthy slogan. I know we didn't start it, but we've been on that train for a while.
Long time.
We're not on the caboose like Stolberg. We've been happy and healthy for a while. Happy and healthy. Keep it fun. Keep it light. And most part,
shift gears.
Take care of your health, man. Take care of who you are and be happy. And races are there to complement things. And that's what we try to do. Again.
Increase your Wordle score. That's what we do.
That's what we do. Increase your ability to have an outstanding Wordle score. And for those of you, before we hop into the meat
3.0,
before we hop into the meat of the podcast, a quick update on Haircut Gate 2022. As I briefly mentioned a few podcasts ago,
man.
Our barbershop was closed. They went to kind of like a speakeasy location. I gave a whirl and went and saw Jane, and she hooked me up with one of my better haircuts in the last 2 years. So I hop on the internet yesterday to reschedule, get another one booking. Done.
They're closed.
They're permanently closed until they can actually get a new look. I was like, hey, listen, not having a set barber in your schedule is like having to rotate through therapists. Like you got to have familiarity. You can't just. I know you can't just have this kind of randomness in your life. It really does throw everything off. But in the typical obstacles away fashion, I say, you know what? About a year ago, I went to this kind of hole in the wall place in the North Shore, which kind of an edgy kind of place, which is not my vibe.
I was surprised actually.
Yeah, and their website's kind of aggressive, and it's kind of like. It's just very edgy, very macho. And I was like, but I went in there one day because I was on my lady was booked. Desperation move. And they gave me a solid 7 out of 10, which is for not knowing who I am, not knowing this cut of hair, not knowing, my general fade. It is a pretty stand-up job. And so I'm going to go back on Saturday, which, as I told you, doing that before. We all get our pre-camp cuts, and this is my pre-camp cut. But getting it on Saturday gives me 3 days to fix it if it's a total screw up. So I'm giving myself a little bit of a buffer to make sure the cut and the beard is on point.
If they screw it up, dude, I'll take care of it.
You're not touching my hair, and I know you. And you would quit this podcast before you actually gave me the name and phone number of your hairstylist. So let's not even pretend that that's even an option.
I gotta admit, I'm getting to an age where I don't really care what my hair looks like.
Well, as much as she took off last time, you're still going to need a haircut for the next 2 months.
I'm just like, there it is. There was my cut.
I'm telling you, people don't speak it.
And I just wore a hat for a few days, and now it's getting to the length where it's like looking all right again.
You don't need a cut. You just need a trim. Like you need a shape up. Is what they call it. You don't leave the top. Don't touch the top,
but
lady.
We're going out into the woods.
Just kind of shape.
Perfect
just kind of shape
to look
it up.
raggy.
Yeah, just kind of shape it up. And we shaped things up last night. I don't know where this podcast can go with you, but we went out to eat last night with our old buddy CC, who was
original gangster.
One of the first 3 original OGs. Like we have a lot of athletes who have been with us for 4 or 5 years. A lot of athletes have been coaching for 4 or 5 years. Some like Joanne Langston was 9 years. She's around, and so that's
been around longer than we have.
That's CC territory. Corey Coggins was one of the athletes who's coached in Nashville 9 years ago. You guys have had a lot of he has been replaced by Chet and Phil, but he was your original Dave Scott, Mark Allen kind of Iron War. He was your Iron War guy. He was your nemesis. He was your go-to.
He set the tone, man.
He set the tone for the competitive. We spent a lot of time together and a lot of rides on the trace together. It was an awesome conversation. We're not going to go into most of it, what we talked about last night, but it was good. It was good to throw back and to have that connection. And I think it's a good reminder, at least for me, just as a human, to have how important it is to have meaningful adult conversation.
Yeah.
Which I know that I miss out on a lot, and I know you miss out on a lot too.
I do, and it does remind you about the core of what's going on here and what we're doing. It's the community aspect, and it's friendships, and we talk about coaching. Obviously, we all want to perform well, and I joked with a new athlete that came on board the other day, and I said, what are your goals? And she said, well, I want to get faster. I go, what? I've never heard that one before.
It's original.
But in reality, we had a funny, good laugh about that.
Yeah.
But it really does boil down to friendships and community and stuff like that. Because, as we have been training in this sport for a long, long, long time, they're just, at some point there's got to be more than, and I think that's why we get off the numbers train so much, is because there's so much more important things in life, and feeling good and having a good community around you, whether it's, not necessarily just our community or whatever, but just having that adult friendship. And when you talk about CC and how we started off and we did a lot of those trace rides together, it's almost like you go through these middle mini battles together, and they just, that's the memories, right, of life. And that you can go back and you have that connection, and that you can trust somebody to have conversations with. And
he was there when you made your power bar comment.
Oh, that's right.
It was just 3 of us. Yeah. When you made your humble, one of the very first humble brags ever, I think, before it was even called a humble brag, you made one. I think what you said was perfect. And I think there's a huge misconception for a lot of people, especially the data obsessed athletes that listen to our podcast, that think we're not about data, but that's actually untrue. I even went through I do a weekly or every other week Zoom call for athletes where we do Q&As. And yesterday I kind of dove into what I said, it's a reminder of the stuff that matters. And before we even went into Training Peaks, I did a screen share with an athlete and went through data and numbers and all the fancy numbers and things in Training Peaks, running and cycling and swimming, and it was very analytical and it was a deep dive. But before we even went into it, what I said is I can't tell you enough how important context is, right? And that these are the last things. Usually, so I gave an example. And there's 3 things I want to cover here, so don't let me forget. One was I'm going to talk about the context thing, but the first one was, we don't talk about data a lot, because what happens is if you, I had a conversation yesterday via text message with an athlete who was just kind of asking questions about rearranging his week, trying to keep the integrity of the situation. And I said, he said, but there is a structural integrity and intention might be a better word, that I try to read into it, as I know, trying to be on anyway, shorthand is what he said as, this is the most engaged I've felt with training in years. And so I'm loving it. And all I said was, just keep loving it and the rest will take care of itself. And I think that's like one of the most important things that people tend to forget. And I'll piggyback that on just one more text I had with an athlete this morning who was kind of overthinking and overanalyzing the preparation that they were going to do leading into a test I was going to have them do in the bike. And I said, something for you to think about before you do this quote unquote test today. Your inability to relax and have fun with this will be what gets a poor result. This isn't a test for NASA. It's a fun workout to see where you are. Let loose, man, or your brain is going to get in the way of your actual ability. And I think what gets lost in so much of the training and the ability for people to be exposed and have access to more information as more numbers is that they let that lead the way, right? They let that lead and drive, what they're going out versus, going out for, I can't do a group, right? I've got to go out today and I've got to hit the specific number and this specific set, and do these things. If you got to have fun with it first, because if you can't have fun with it and you can't remember that this is all to complement your life and to keep things happy and to keep things healthy and to insert and infuse a positive, influence into your life, then you can obsess about numbers and data and analytics and, PRing and all this, but it's going to go, right? You're going to burn out. You're going to be done. That stuff's going to fade because it's a dead end street, right? Because there's only one, right? PR, if you're ever going to have in your life, there's only one best day. The rest of it is going to be spent chasing that. And you're eventually going to get tired of chasing something you're afraid you might not get. But if the pursuit is to be happy, be healthy, to be consistent, to, hold yourself accountable, to have structure in your life, to have these positive benefits that don't have to yield something you compare it to, then the journey can be endless, right? Until you're able to be done, or until you want to be done. I think that's something that is honestly what happens, going back to what I wanted to say about context, is the context in which you look at your training. And the example I was giving was, if you go through Training Peaks, and I think a lot of self-coach athletes do this because they don't really have anybody to comment to unless they're keeping a journal, is like the numbers in Training Peaks, just because they're there and that they're provided doesn't mean that they're 100% something you should. It's not all input and output like you see in Training Peaks. You have to always know context. And so one of the best examples I can give, and it's a little bit on the extreme side, but it's still important, is if you go through Training Peaks and you go 4 to 6 to 8 weeks in a row and you do all your workouts and you never comment, right? Then you're thinking, it's a direct input and output. They're going to spit out metrics. They're going to tell me my ATL, my CTO, all these different analytics to tell you how fit you're getting based on the scores from in the TSS and in the output from your training, and you are the input. But what Training Peaks can't decipher, and what these other platforms like TriDot that are artificial intelligence, until those things grow hearts, they're never going to be able to, and they can read and actually take in, be empathetic and have conversations. They're never going to be as good or even in the ballpark of having an actual person as a coach. Because what you need from context is, let's say you go out for a 45-minute run on a Tuesday and you have 150 heart rate and then you have an 8-minute pace, right? Boom, and the elevation change, and then Training Peaks does its analytics and spits out, your training stress score and this and that, and you're going to go back and look at that to compare of, well, what if it's the wintertime, right? And this is the example I used with this gentleman, was, 4 days later, you go out for a run, you got a higher heart rate, 150, right? And just slower pace, right? So which you wouldn't think, you would think, slower pace equals lesser heart rate, right? And let's say if it's even a flatter course, so your metrics gonna be way off. Well, if you don't provide context, you don't add anything to that, it's going to mess up, again, the analytics that Training Peaks spits out. If you're a person who goes back and, which a lot of people do, they go back and frequently compare, well, I ran this exact route 4 years ago today, and this is my number, this is my number. If you don't provide context, you're not getting the whole picture. You could had a great night of sleep. You could have a poor night of sleep. You could be hyped up on caffeine. You can not have any caffeine. You could be fueled perfectly, not fueled perfectly. You have stress. You can not have stress. All these things affect heart rate. The biggest thing in this example I used was this guy went and ran in 4 inches of snow in his yak tracks. Mm-hmm. Okay. So slower pace, higher heart rate, but he was putting out a lot of effort. But if you don't know those things, you look at it and you think, oh, something's not right. Right. So this isn't going the way you're overtrained, right? Something isn't going well. So when you go back and look at, because most people who self-coach, it's exercise randomness, right? They do things here, they do things, and they hope for a really, really good outcome on race day. And if it's a good outcome, they consider their training or their exercising regimen a success. When training is structured with a specific result you want to gain at the end. So when you don't provide context, great day, bad day, snow, sunshine, high dew point, low dew point, I felt like trash, I didn't feel like trash. Like, you have to provide context to all these things before you get into even the numbers. It's not something you do in reverse, right? It's something about you have to read, how's your day going? I was highly stressed. Read the comments before you interpret the data. Don't do it in reverse. And I think that's where a lot of athletes get lost in the minutia that is all these numbers and decorative extra sauce, if you will, that Training Peaks provides, because really what they want you to do is spend the extra $120 a year to buy the premium, because now they removed all these things, these pretty little lights on Christmas tree features that you can't see anymore. But we're going to pay because I'm telling you, you need them, right? You have to have them. You have to have them. So you're like, oh, well, if I have to have them, I have to pay more for them. They must be very, very important, right? And the fact of the matter is, it's an upsell, right? And so if you're going to provide, you need to provide context to get the most out of what you're doing each day. And that should come from your mouth and what you're feeling before it comes from what your garment spits out as a good day or a bad day.
Mm-hmm. The thing about what I like to think about as an analogy with that, and for me, it always sort of comes back to like analytics in sports and things like that. If you look at a full baseball season, 162 games, and I look at that as almost training, because you're just doing it every day, and what matters is how you play and how your team plays in the playoffs and World Series, right? And you see it every year. These teams that dominate during the year, and they're like, playing the analytics game or whatever. But then it comes down to it in the clutch. Everybody's too tense, and they can't like move a runner, get a run across, or like it's just these little things to me. And I like to think of that as the training season, and then the race. The race is the playoffs and the things that really sort of matter in professional sports. And you see it in all sports, really. Everybody's so caught up in, game 38 of the regular season. It doesn't really matter as long as you're getting better. And you've always seen certain teams will start clicking in August or September and just get on a roll. And it's sort of like they have been, putting all their energy into gelling as a team and being relaxed. And you see it in the playoffs, the teams that it's almost like they're super relaxed and they're having a blast out there. You could see it this last weekend. That's like certain teams tensed up. I feel like the Packers got a little tense. They were favored. They should have won. And then
at home, perfect
everything's
conditions
going. And San Francisco is just like playing.
Yeah.
And shit was just kind of dropping in their lap and things like that. I think about that back to when I used to play baseball. We'd play double headers, and you take batting practice every day. You know how to hit. You know what you can do. And so what's the difference in the game? Sometimes I would start off and I'd have like 3 or 4 hits in the first game, and then again I'd hit in the second game, and I have like 5 in a row, and then I'd be like, oh shit, and then I'd start getting all tightened up and whatever, and I might pop one and drop it in or something like that. But if you start thinking too much, and that's been always my thing with triathlon. I had a conversation with somebody the other day. I don't want to say Ironman's 50% mental, but it might be close. We all have, especially if you've gone through it, you know what you're doing. And then at what point are you able to deal with the unpredictable circumstances and be relaxed and not freak out or not get overly tense out on the course and ruin your flow and your stride and whatever it is, and just let your race fall apart? Or are you going to be able to figure out the problems as they come up? And I don't think you can do that when you're stressed or anxious.
There was even I can't remember which game it was now. It was one of the great games, but it was one of the football games this weekend. They like went off on halftime about how everyone's becoming obsessed with going with what the analytics say. Go for it, or to not go for it on 4th down, or to kick the extra point, or to go for 2. And there was a team, I can't remember who it was again, like there was a penalty on the extra point, and they moved from the 2 to the 1, and they were like, got to go for it, and they didn't get it. So they missed 7, going up like 7-0, or no, they would have gone up 7-6, so they stayed tied 6-6. I want to say it was the Titans-Bengals game, but they were like, stop. Yeah. Stop going with the analytics and go with your gut. What does your gut tell you is the best thing for the team right now? Right. To go for it, or just to kick it and move on, right? And we get so lost in what, again, I think one of the biggest things people have still like failed to wrap their brain around is we are imperfect, flawed, and consistent at making errors, right? As humans, right? Well, guess who makes those? Guess who creates all of the numbers and the input to make these analytics put out? People, right? Or even machines that are made by people who provide imperfections and errors. Go with your gut, right? Do things that you think are going to make you feel good. Not always, and even like it drives me up the wall that when the amount of stock people put in their watch, right? Well, it tells me today my body battery is low and I'm not going to have a good performance today. Do you know how much of that is cockapoo? Do you know how much of it is like can we just, I'm trying to shield a little bit of my language these days. I've been dropping a lot of F-bombs apparently. And I just want to, kind of, a lot of people listen to this in the minivan, their Hyundai, whatever the minivans are called these days. And do you understand what happens to your mind when you see you don't feel good, right? Guess what? You're not going to go out and have a good run. Because we become what we are, right? What we think. If your watch is telling you, you are below baseline, you're not going to perform well today. You know what you're immediately going to do? Not perform well, right? Or perform up to the standard of not performing well, right? Because your watch said, based on whatever it had, is you're not going to perform well today. Instead of just covering it up and thinking, perfect example, my run today. I went out a little more middle of the day than I usually get up early. You said you and CC were grabbing lunch, and I worked this morning and I was like, man, this is a beautiful day. I better hit the trail. And I went out and everything on my watch, everything else that I tend to track was like, it's not going to be really that awesome today. And I stepped out the front door and I was like, well, that's bullshit, because the sun was out. It was beautiful. It's still cool enough to wear your normal like winter gear. Had probably the best trail run I've had in like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Totally opposite of what everything that was telling me what I was supposed to have. It was the polar opposite. And so because I also told myself, I feel like this is actually going to be a pretty good run today. Like, and the more you, and again, when I go back to like, training peaks and the numbers and the data, and they're all important, but they're irrelevant, or they're not as meaningful without context. Is before even if you're a person who uses, heart rate, all the time, or HRV, or your Garmin body battery, or whatever it is, like before you look at it, do a self-check, right? Make sure these things match, because if what you're feeling doesn't match what's being spit out, then something's not right? Because it should be to affirm how you're feeling. And then on the other ends of the spectrum, like there should be outliers. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast or on our Zoom call a few weeks ago, but they were doing, they were talking about an interview with the sports scientists, Norwegian athletes, Christian Blumenfeld and Gustav Fied, and they were talking about, they use all this data, right? They have the core temp, they do HRV, they have, 14 different straps and running power and bike power, and they use all this stuff. But at the end of the day, during their session to monitor the intensity, they use all that and spits out the number. But if the athlete tells them, if the numbers say, you don't feel very good today, and the athlete's like, no, I feel pretty damn good today. Guess what they go with? The freaking athlete, right? Not the machine, not the strap that was made 8 countries away from, a manufacturer or factory. They go with the person, right? No one knows you better than yourself. No one. Not a coach, not a software, not a watch, not a bike computer, not a power meter, nothing. Right. And what's happened is most people and this is where I feel incredibly grateful to, and this might sound old timer, and that's fine. Is I feel incredibly grateful to have gotten into this sport 15 plus years ago, when there was minimal things available to use as a training tool. There wasn't all these extra devices and smart trainers and power meters and HRV and extra analytics and training peaks. There weren't those things. Like they were just now coming, and they weren't very popular. Everything you did was off field. It was like I had to learn my body and to learn how I was going to be successful by looking at warning signs, looking at positive signs. How can I react? When do I, you wake up in the day and you have your first couple steps and you kind of know what you're going to feel like that day. Like these are the things, instead of looking at I'm going to say annoyed. I'm annoyed at how often we let a piece of equipment tell us how we feel. right? Or tell us what we can and cannot do, or that you're overreaching, or that you're doing this. I'm like, I see my watch say like, required rest 48 hours. I'm like, fuck off. Like, there goes the F word again.
It is.
There goes.
That's
I'm like, cockapoo. I'm like, stop telling me what I feel, right?
Yeah, I'm a politician.
Right. Oh, exactly. Right. Or, here we go.
No, I'm not going.
It's like, just stop telling me how I feel and what I'm capable of doing, because all it does is shield you more than likely and create a barrier or an obstacle in your mind and your body to what's actually going to happen. And the same goes for overperforming, right? Your watch says, oh, well, you're +4 of your baseline today. You should have a great run. And you go out for the first 10 minutes, you're like, I don't feel good, but my watch said I should be feeling good. So I'm going to press on and make sure I meet the expectation of feeling good, when what you should do is be like, all right, do I feel good? Do I not feel good? And it's a skill you should learn. And the more you go back, and I mentioned this yesterday, to kind of go back to how you should marry data and context, is you can't even measure your own data. Like there's so many athletes that are obsessed with numbers, and really it's just an infatuation. It's not about being better or using it to create a better performance. It's infatuation with numbers and data. That's not scientific. That's not, you're not data driven. It just means you infatuation with numbers. You just like it. You like the decoration. In order to actually apply the knowledge that you gain from it, you must be accountable, consistent, and responsible with the amount of time it takes to be consistent enough to give you a sample set in which you can take the data and apply it to good use for your own training. 1 out of every 100 athletes who's obsessed with numbers actually does that. The other ones just like the decor of numbers and what it looks like. Oh, this is my number. Like, okay, well, tell me how you use it. Tell me how you're going to apply that to your training. Not just because it looks good or you can spit out more numbers, because it's just more, right? You have to be able to look through things. And again, in order to give a good sample set, you can't work out 3 days a week and then 5 days a week and then 8 and then 7 days a week and then back to 1 and back to 3. Like all you're doing is giving me a sample set of randomness, right? You can't predict or plan based off randomness. That's not training. That's erratic exercising, right? You have to be consistent and accountable to provide a good enough. Same thing goes for, again, going back to, for those of you who log in Training Peaks or you're self-coach, like, again, if you're going to go by trends, right? Which is a code, you look for trends in training, trending good, trending bad, trending even. You have to, and this is like, these are the small things I think just go way over people's heads because we're focused on the wrong details. It's like, you can't on a Tuesday hop on your trainer in your 68-degree man cave room with your fan set to its standard level 3, exactly 2 meters away from your face, and do your workout, right? So you take that workout, you don't know any of that occurred, right? So you have these numbers that were spit out in Training Peaks. Your average power 200, average heart rate 125, okay, and then the next week, well, you're on the road. So you're in the Marriott hotel room with no fan, no airflow. It's probably 73 in there. You got no ceiling fan, no fan with you. You worked 6 hours. You hop on the bike. You're going to get probably 180 watts and a higher heart rate. So if you don't have the context and things aren't repeatable, then you can't compare them, right? And I think we've in like Garmin and the numbers that we have and the Training Peaks, and like they take all these things and they don't because they can't filter in. They're only able to take the knowledge and the numbers that they're given. I think that's what you have to understand as an athlete, especially if you're self-coach or following a training plan, is Training Peaks is limited to what you give it. And even when you give it, it doesn't know the environment in which you did it in. These are things you have to track and you have to keep count of. And I think there's this, I compare it to the weatherman. We always know whether people are predominantly wrong. Okay, you're all wrong. You're right like once every 2 weeks. Yeah, what do? What's the weather like next week?
Yeah.
Right? We put so much stock in not trusting the weather report because it's usually wrong. What do we always do when we're trying to make plans? Check the weather.
We got to do it. I can't tell you how many races I've seen ruined in people's heads.
I know, dude, a week away. And it's very, very true with, even like with power meters and numbers and how incorrect, wrist-based watches are and the inaccuracies based on even certain, like even things that are used, tools that are used to provide data, like, running power meters. They've totally changed what they measure in the last year. Now it's measuring like efficiency and its version of kilojoules, which is energy, and what power meters do for cycling. They've gone and that's what they do now versus what they said they used to do, which was actual force and power. So like, you can't even trust that or things not to change. And so I think that it's very important to, when you look at all the things that are provided and you can purchase and you can have, it's like, just give me it's like walking to the restaurant. Just give me the meat and the three. Okay. Give me the turkey and the mashed potatoes, the green beans and the coleslaw. Call it a day, right? You did what's your special?
Take your chances.
Take your chances with the standard. Like how can you mess up a grilled cheese and tomato soup? You can't, right? It's like, these are the things that I think we all have to understand. And I think as exciting and as attractive as it is to have, because I do think it provides an additional, provides an additional excitement and attractiveness to training because it provides more numbers. And for some people that gets them on the bike. And I was looking through my data and I'm like, tell me what it means. Don't tell me the numbers. Tell me what it means. Again, 99 out of 100 triathletes obsessed with numbers can't even tell you what it means because they can't go back and actually tell you with any kind of, consistent, strategic planning. All right, this is what happened here, and this is how I know I got here. You just got there, and which also means you probably can't get back, right? It's like blindfolding yourself and getting in the car, and you end up to like the most beautiful, serene, lake house, and you're like, this place is the best. I am the man. I got here, and you're like, all right, now I'm gonna blindfold your ass and take you back to the rest up on 98, and then have you get back here. Can't do it, right? You just ended up there. You don't know how you got there. You don't have a map. You didn't trace your steps. You didn't leave breadcrumbs. You just got there. And while that might seem great for the one, the chances of you ever getting back there again, 0, right? 0.
Where you just took me back to business calc in college and statistics class. Yeah. Because I remember specifically, we had this professor. I think he was sort of a former intellect, business advisor type person that had never been necessarily in business. But I remember that was a very difficult class for me, as you can imagine. I was a business major, but I had business stats was probably my hardest class. It's like I got a B.
It's my physics.
But I worked my ass off, and then we would sit there some days and work on problems throughout most of the class, and I'd get done and we'd have this big formula in front of us and I go, what the hell does this even mean? I figured we figured it out in the end, and he'd be like, well, that's that's your graph for, how many sales you're going to have this year. And I was like, really? And then there was always that addition, right? Plus or minus a margin of 3 error on either side of it, So now all of a sudden it may or may not be right, or it's got some flexibility or whatever. And then we talk about things like diminishing marginal returns on a scale. Some people get sick of things and they start not selling as well or whatever. But what does that have to do? My always thought was, what's that got to do with the salesperson out there making things happen, or what, like face to face or in the crux and the heart of the soul of the product and the company. Yeah, you can kind of predict shit like that. I get it. I get that stats try to figure in algorithms of human nature and behavior and things like they try to do that. But really in the end, man, it's like, I don't know. I guess for me, it just sort of always took the human element out, or like the fun out of it in a way. I mean, it's fun to figure out a formula. And like, if you want to bet on football and, normally it's right or whatever, you can get that and you can win the bets and things like that. And I get it. But even that is like off. I mean, how do you predict anything anymore? Like I saw the other day that we've, probably all by now heard of this concept of NFTs and their digital artwork for sale or things like that. And one of the hottest ones is like these gross pixelated imagery that was, like Atari graphic level. That's like the hot new thing. I mean, how do you even predict that? Where does that come from? Where do trends come from? And I know people always try to figure this out, but it's just for me, you know,
it goes back to sales. You know, you don't sell the product to someone, you sell the person on the product. Right. And it's like when you talk about like trends and analytics what
matters, man? Because last night mattered, right? We had a good dinner with a buddy that we've been in triathlon for a long time with, and we've all had our ups and downs in the sport. But
listen, I mean, both of y'all are substantially smarter than I am, but
different ways.
But we all came to the consensus, which was, I think if we just kind of use a lot of common sense, we'll be okay. You know, and I think that's something that we communicate, yeah, and can people and go with your gut on things. And it's like and you and I do that a lot, you know, with our with business and with coaching, with what we do. It's like just kind of go with our gut, you know. Even like somebody walk in with a shirt and tie and like I'm from Merrill Lynch and Co. and we would love you to be like, yeah, it doesn't really feel right. It doesn't really sound right. Even though everything's like, well, according to you had this. I'm like, you gotta not only do you have to know yourself, okay, you have to know what matters to you, right? Because the world is going to consistently Strava, your local club page, Athlinks, the training results, TriCalc, all these different things are clouding what matters to you. And I think, again, the athletes that stay the most true on course to their goal are the ones that basically quiet everything out. They don't look for more input. They're focused on their own personal output. Okay. And I think we've become so obsessed with adding in more information. Information is power. I'm like, yeah, if you know how to use it, right? And you know what's good information and what's bad information. Like that's like everyone thinks that the internet and the being able to easily source so much, quote unquote information. Again, information not meaning it's correct, right? It could be incorrect or it could be correct or incorrect information. The ability for us to have access to so much is actually a bad thing, right? Because I think we don't, as individuals, also, depending on who it is, or all of us, don't always have the ability to discern what is true and what is not, right? Like we have become so easily clouded in. We've lost. I think we just lost going with your gut. It's not, well, the numbers say. It's like, what happened to going with your gut, right? Going with your heart, staying the course because you set out to sign up for this race because this, and this. Then stay the course. Don't get distracted, right? Like I had this email back and forth with an athlete. It was like, two good examples just happened to end up this way. Is they're like, well, this year I was going to do this, and I was going to do that, but I got an email from USAT, I qualified for USAT Nationals, so I'm thinking about, changing my schedule and doing this, but I'm not really sure that, this kind of setup is good for me because, I qualified for this, but, I kind of see myself as a slow and steady kind of guy, not a fast guy. And I said, all right, two things. One, don't disrupt your entire race calendar that you thought through, that meant something to you, that made sense to you, because of an effing email from some random person who wants you to sign up for the race and give them money.
Right.
Second one, just because you think you're a slow and steady athlete doesn't mean you are. Going back to we tell ourselves, we become what we tell ourselves, right? Like I can't go long, I'm a short and fast. Well, of course you're not going to, because you're never going to try it, right? You're never going to see. And especially like when you and I get new athletes that say what they're really, really good at, I'm like, all right, I trust you, right? I believe you, but it doesn't mean you're right? Just because what happens is athletes come to us like, yeah, I'm running's my thing, and so you look back at the training like, yeah, because you run 6 days a week, bike one, and swim twice. Like, yeah, so running's going to be your thing. And then after a few weeks of more balanced training, you might be like, I hate to break it to you, dude, but cycling's actually your thing. Everyone has the one of the three that they're naturally better at, given the amount of time they put into it. So a lot of people just don't even know. We assume, I'm not really good at hilly courses. They're not really my thing. Have you done one? Well, I did one 4 years ago. It was my first. Okay, it was your first one. Okay, let's not assign ourselves an identity based on one time, right? And I think that's it's okay to evolve. It's okay for for what matters to change, right? You and I have talked about that a lot the last few days. It's like, what matters in life, has changed for a lot of people the last 2 or 3 years. The most important thing about what matters in your own life is that it matters to you. Okay. Who gives a shit about what anybody else thinks? If it matters to you, then stay true to it. Don't get distracted and like, yeah, maybe this might, because that's what everybody else is doing. They're getting distracted. They're not staying the course. They're getting pulled different directions. They're making irresponsible choices. They're taking, an inordinate number of risks. Stay the course, stay true. And that's the same thing with your training is people get so distracted. And so, because we are become an attention deficit society. Mm-hmm. We need to be tempted to be distracted or to be distracted to feel like we're actually doing something versus what should be happening is the more still you are, the more focused you are on not taking on more tasks and not doing more things. That should be applauded. I've got 19 startups I'm working on right now. And I'm like, well, how are they all going? Right. It's like focus on one, like in doing, like picking up too many things and doing too many things. It's like, you're basically a master of none. Like you wear a hat, it's like, I always use this, like the guy I used to work for like 12 years ago, probably one of the smartest guys I've ever worked for in my entire life. And he had 50 things halfway done and 0 things finished.
Right.
And he got out of the business, and did something else. But I was like,
out of all the businesses.
You get out of all the businesses, which he could have probably just done one great one. I think that's what happens with us so much is we've become, our level of concentration has become distraction. Yeah. And that's what we need to stay focused now is distraction, not honing in on one specific thing to just make the main thing the main thing. Or was it keep the main thing the main thing? Like that the phrase, it's like, instead of keep the main thing what's that? Is it a fly? Is it an ant? What is that? Is it a squirrel?
What?
It's like what? And then you're all totally off course and doing something you don't even know how to remember you got there.
Well, I think that might be the crux of all of this is when we talk about all the datas and all the numbers, that what a lot of it is distraction, right? Because it's sort of like a new toy out there to play with all the time. And really, distraction to me equals stress. If you think of it, because it boils down to like, what are you focused on? I mean, I follow a lot of, things about meditation and things like that, and I'm not great at it. I go in and out of that or whatever. But when you're trying to be in meditation, you're trying to get rid of you kind of calm all the extra thoughts and just be in the moment and be, comfortable with that. And they have a term, it's called the middle way. So like nothing out here is bad, but like, what parts of those things do we want to pay attention to and sort of drag it all to the middle? And I mean, the middle way is basically a Buddhist philosophy that always wants to bring you to center. And the extremes are things you want to let go of because they don't really matter to your life and they can be a distraction. And like I said, I feel like that equals stress. I was listening to this guy talk about, actually it was an investing podcast, and they're talking about the volatility, all this shit, and how do you get out at the right time and sell at the right time and buy at the same time. And then he finally came out and he goes, in the end, the people with the least amount of stress are the winners.
Yeah.
And I think that just applies to life and it can apply to training because it's like, at what point do you just, like you're saying, the meat and potatoes, if you just sort of follow your meat and potatoes kind of consistency, that'll just keep you right in the pocket and you don't have to worry about, things you're missing out on, but it always takes you toward, it's like go out every day and take batting practice and just work on being better at hitting and you're just going to be a better hitter. You don't have to like tweak your swing every day and screw around with all that kind of stuff. You just have to be able to flow in the moment. And man, it's this thing about, it's like so mental to calm down. It's like the racing, the training. It's like, man, I swear, me. I mean, from the get-go, I've always been like this. You have to admit, like even back in the day, I was like, why are we doing this? What's this? And we get sometimes distracted out on things, and I'd be just like, I just want to go out and feel good today, and really kind of like put in a good effort and not overdo it. And that was always my thing too. Is like because I did come from baseball, like sort of shorter bursty type sports in my basketball. I was never an endurance guy ever. And to your point, I could have always said, well, I'm an sprint Olympic guy. I'm just not a long distance guy. And I figured it out, and I think that everybody has the potential to do that. But you have to pay attention to where you're going and listen to yourself and your body and how you feel. And and not get too wrapped up in silly things. It's just like, I just was like, some days it was all I could do just to go run like an hour, back in the day. And if I did that to and I knew if I got done and I was absolutely wiped out and zapped, and I was like, I probably went too hard or whatever the case may be. But just listening to those kind of cues has always been really my secret to going through this stuff. And granted, I'm not going to ever be the top guy in my age group or anything like that, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It's just all about feeling good.
It is. And what you said is, I think, really, really important for all athletes to know is, and I even said this yesterday on the Zoom calls, I said, the job of a coach isn't for you to learn me. It's for me to learn you, right? It's not for you to feel like you have to change who you are to conform to what I'm putting in. It's my job to manipulate things in a way to where you're doing them the way I want you to do them without having to think about it, right? It's what I don't want is for you to have to overthink about doing it the way that I want to, because then we're not getting anywhere. It's like, that's why I was like telling the guy or Mark, who came in for some analysis earlier this week, he's a very analytical person. I gave him some cues and I went and stood in front of the pool. And before he even got it, I said, dude, stop creating algorithms in your head and focus. He was like, sorry. I was like, literally, you have to tell people, stop thinking, just do it. Let it flow. Just do it. Stop being so concerned about making the perfect move that you're never going to make a right move, right? Or it's all going to be in slow motion, still going to be wrong. Like, that's one of those things where you have to, again, going back to like, your business class, and it's like, you don't sell the product to a person, you sell the person on the product. That's very much how the coaching is. You observe athletes, you tell them to do one thing and they continue to maybe push too hard. Right. So if you want them to be, instead of trying to recalibrate a person's feel, right, for zone 2, you don't give them zone 2 anymore. You give them zone 1 because they're going to be in zone 2. Right. It's like, the way I used to tell you, if I wanted to meet for lunch with you at 12, I'd tell you we're meeting at 11:30 because you're always going to be late.
There you go.
You adapt to the other person. And that's how you have to do as a coach. You have to adapt to, all right, just because I want this to work doesn't mean it's going to work. Right. It's like giving someone, and this is, again, you can think that it has to go perfectly and have to, keep the integrity of the training week and the training block. But if you give someone a session, they're like, I hate this session. It's either they never do it and skip it, right? Or they do it half-ass, or they're scared to complete it, right? Are you going to keep giving it to them because, well, this is the way we get better? No. You give them something they're going to complete, right? Giving people things that they like is your job as a coach. Like, appropriately like. It doesn't have to be easy. It shouldn't be overly hard, but it needs to be enough to where it keeps them engaged and it feels attainable. Or, you and I's favorite, phrase that we hear from athletes, I felt appropriately challenging, right? If you see that something's appropriately challenging, you're going to do it, right? You're going to feel good about it, right? You're going to put some intent, you're going to put some focus into it. If it looks like way too much, it's like, waking up and your watch telling you you're not going to have a good day. Guess what? You're not going to have a good day. Guess what the workout's going to be? Too much, right? And that's just one of those things where you have to learn, if you think about it, and this goes for, the athletes that we work with and anybody else, it's like, you've been you for a long time, right? So for me to come in, if it's I know this, it's like, so for me to come in and try to change the way you think and to try and get you to quantify how you feel based on what I need to see, based on how I coach, is a dead end street, right? It's my job to basically take my scale and maneuver it in a way to where it matches whatever your scale is, right? Your scale of 1 to 10 on RPE, or your scale of what feels right in my scale. They might not meet, perfectly together, right? Mm-hmm. They might meet just a little bit off. So what do I need to do now is, like, going back to, like, the be on time analogy, is like, if I want you to be here, I probably have to tell you to aim here, right? Or if you generally go too slow and you're too reserved, then maybe I tell you to work high zone 2 instead of middle or low zone 2, because if I want you to be in middle zone 2, guess what I'm gonna tell you to do? Be in high zone 2, because your feel is going to take you different directions. And I think that's just again, it comes down to knowing who you are and being consistent with it. But for the most part, it's like, numbers matter, the data matters, the analytics matter, but only when and if you're consistent enough to make it matter and you provide enough context to be able to solve the problem that is trying to get you better. And we can wrap it up there. It's like, I think that's just one of the most important for athletes that are self-coached, that have no that have nothing to bounce things off the walls with, or you're blindfolded swinging in a pinata, hope you crack it and the candy falls out one day. And it's good candy. It's like black licorice, and I think that things like, you might bust out the pinata and have a good race, but it might be black licorice. You might, what you want is to bust it open, have some, Reese's peanut butter cups fall out. That's the real goal.
Just quickly, I want to kind of revisit you as my coach for a minute back in the day. And I think you realize, at some point, because I am such a, I don't know, mind over matter type of person. And I've never been a consistent trainer. I say never, but I've had my moments and things like that. And I think I would like to think anyway that, when you would set me out on a course at a race, you probably in your mind were like, I'm not worried about this. He's going to figure it out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I may have been undertrained or whatever, that kind of stuff. And I think that as you saw that kind of thing, and that's all part of it, right? That's why I'm so, I think in that regard, I probably need to come back to the middle way a little bit too. It's like, it would be a lot easier if I just would be more consistent and that kind of thing. And then who knows where that might take me if I can still employ the mind over matter kind of principle and thing. And I think that's what actually started happening to me since I've been racing a lot over time, is that my mental willpower and strength is kind of wearing down a little bit, like, trying to get through something just to say I could or whatever. So I think it is a very interesting concept to think about, like understanding the athlete and knowing what they're capable of, and sort of learning them and training to their strengths and weaknesses and things like that. And it's just a huge subtlety. And I think, again, those aren't really necessarily reflected in data points all the time.
It's a skill,
right? And listening and paying attention.
It's exactly. It's a skill. Okay. And I think that's, if you're a self-coached athlete, coached athlete, whatever it is, the athletes that I have the most confidence in and that's confidence to get the most out of themselves on the day, given the day and given how they feel, are the ones that I know have that skill set, that know who they are. Right. And because, and how I know that is that I know them, very closely, which most athletes, but it's the ones that over time you see them they start to work and train, not by themselves, not by this, but, they make their own decisions. Yeah. We had an hour and a half today, but I didn't get a lot of sleep, so I cut it back to 110. You are the man, right? Because you made a perfect decision and you're now trusting yourself, right? It's not about not trusting your coach. It's about trusting yourself. And if you can trust yourself as an athlete to make good decisions, to push forward, to pull back, to know when to do it and when not to do it, then you're much more apt to have a great race than a poor race, because the athletes who will force themselves to get through it are the same ones on race day that will force themselves into doing something they shouldn't be doing. And they will sacrifice and alter the whole course of their race day because of that one decision to not think autonomously and think, all right, what's really, really good for me right now? Like I know I said we're going to stop, but like the analogy or the experience for myself as an athlete that I use all the time was Chattanooga 70.3 3 years ago. I mean, it's 4 years ago. Jesus, 4 years ago now, 3.5, whatever. Yeah. I was coming off a pretty good Texas 70.3 that you were at. It was probably one of the best races I've ever had. And I'd been on some trips and I wasn't feeling in it, but I got out of the swim. I swam pretty well. And the first 10 miles of the bike, I felt like trash. Legs were shot. I had nothing. I was like, and my goal for that day was to hold between 220 and 230 watts. And I think I averaged 180 or 190 for the first 20 miles because I was like, I don't have it. And my first thought was, all right, well, if you want the result to be the result, that you want today, you better go 220. And then I just thought to myself, I might not have 220 now, but I might have 230 later. Right. And so what I did was I just took the first 20 miles super easy, and I was like way, way, way low. Finally, out of nowhere, about an hour in, legs came around, and I did. I pushed about 230, 235 the way home and ended up having a really, really good day. And the reason I had a good day was because I had a shitty first hour. and I actually accepted the fact that I was having a really bad hour. I didn't sacrifice the rest of my race because of that bad hour. I just kind of let it be. And I was like, to make those decisions and not, because I know if I'd have gone 220, it would have gone 215, 210, 185, and then have been just like, all my biscuits are burnt. I'm just going to cruise it on home. And then the confidence I would have had on the run would have been zero, right? And it affects your whole day. It's one of those, it's a skill set you have to gain over time and experiences. And the best place to gain that is training, right? It's not on race day. If you can't expect to have it on race day, you can expect to have it out yourself in training.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Little decisions all throughout training that
little bit
add up.
They all add up, man.
All right, buddy.
All right. It's 27th. 4 more days for the club.
4 more days.
4 more days for the club. Get in there.
Hop on today.
Hop on the website, C26triathlon.com. It's your one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. Click on the club tab, learn more about that. And if you have any questions about the club and what it can do for you, reach out to Mike. He's at crushingiron@gmail.com. You can always click on our coaching tab as well and peruse our stable of coaches if you want some help to be successful this year and take the stress off. Check those out. And if you ever need anything from me, you can get a hold of me at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, yeah, hit me up. We'll talk a little business calc.
Get them on the hip.
See ya.